Welcome to this month's edition of Pulp Nonfiction, the paper and packaging podcast. I'm Greg Johnson with Sustana Fiber, and I'm here once again with my co-host, Dr. Marta Pazos. So, Marta, it's good seeing you again. And is it just me, or does it seem like we're seeing more and more cooking and food shows on TV?
Hi, Greg. I am so excited today. I am actually one of those people that is addicted to food shows, to cooking shows. And yes, Gordon Ramsay has a lot of them. Master Chef, The Next Level Chef. I also really like Top Chef, but one of my favorites is hosted by Cat, which is tasteMAKERS. I absolutely love her, and I am so excited to speak with her today.
Exactly, Marta. And what better way to explore some of these TV and marketplace food issues than with our guest today, Catherine Cat Neville, the producer and host of the critically acclaimed PBS television series, tasteMAKERS. Based in St. Louis, Cat has had a remarkably successful food-focused career, from reviewing restaurants and food truck trends to exploring the farm-to-table movement and regenerative agriculture. Prior to launching tasteMAKERS in 2017, Cat co-founded Sauce Magazine in 1999, and later in 2010 became publisher of Feast Magazine and Feast TV. Recently, Cat's added another new venture to her busy calendar involving Explore St. Louis. As a result of all her creative work, Cat has been the recipient of several Emmy Awards, an Emmy Award, as well as several James Beard nominations. Cat, it's great to see you again. We're grateful for your time today, and thank you for visiting with us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be on your Pulp Nonfiction podcast, Greg. It's really great to see you, and you too, Marta.
Kat, it's so great meeting you. I am actually so starstruck. I absolutely have been following your show. And I remember I started following your show when a few years ago I started traveling domestically. And in hotel rooms, we didn't have that many channels, let alone streaming channels, because streaming didn't exist. And PBS was always the one that I found the best to go to in those moments where I found myself alone in a hotel room in the middle of America. And that's when I started following your tasteMAKERS show. How did you come up with such a fun sounding name?
I've actually been in food media for about 20 years, and I launched a website that covered the St. Louis food scene. I'm based in St. Louis, Missouri, in like 1999, took it into print in 2001. And I started doing some television work on our local Channel 4, like CBS affiliate. It was weekly restaurant reporting. And I just kind of fell in love with being on location. I fell in love with the way that video told stories in a more immersive way than print or even radio could do. And so when I launched Feast magazine, which was the second magazine that I launched, and it's regional, meaning that it covers kind of the Midwest, I knew I wanted to have video be part of it. And so I started doing some kind of one-off videos that were tied to the content of the magazine. And after a little bit, I was like, if we took the 4 or 5 videos that we're producing every month and kind of smushed them together, it would be kind of like a magazine style show. So you're absolutely right. The work for tasteMAKERS is a little more serious, quote unquote. It is more educational, because I think there are a lot of amazing cooking shows out there, and there are tons of people who are doing really good work in that space. And I wanted to tell the story of how food is made. And I also wanted to tell the story of the connections within the food industry. And, the idea of eat local, it almost sounds trite because we've heard it so much, but it's critically important that people understand the path that food takes to their plate so that they can make informed decisions. And so what I do with tasteMAKERS is I pick a maker. And so a cheesemaker or a bread baker or a brewer or something like that. And then I weave in the story of people who they're connected to in their community. Maybe it's a farmer who grows the barley for a certain brewery, or a bakery that carries the bread from this particular baker, or something like that. And so you get to meet a lot of people who are doing very thoughtful, independent, creative work in the food and beverage, industry. And you also get to explore how they're connected and how these things are made. And that's what I get really excited about in the food space, is kind of going beyond just, here's a great radish, this is what you can do with it. I really want to know, where was the radish grown, what variety of radish is it, all that kind of stuff. So that's really what the show's about.
I love it. And I'll tell you what, as a chemist that I am, you have also always included something related to the chemistry, the chemical processes, right? That food goes. I know that chemical process is a dirty word these days, but it is, everything goes through a chemical process, right? Like such as fermentation. That is like the one that I can think of at the first time. At first, and in tastemakers, I see how you guys also introduce that. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Obsessed.
Well, I mean, that's what cooking is. I mean, cooking,
Well, I know.
you're applying heat, you're applying acid, you're curing with this, you're baking. I mean, there are so many ways that science and food intersect. And actually, this is kind of an aside, but my very first job was at Washington University Medical School here in St. Louis in the Department of Molecular Biology and Pharmacology. And all of those scientists were huge fans of cooking. And for that exact reason, is that cooking truly is tied to science and chemistry, and it's just fascinating.
Yep. The best chemists I've ever met are actually really good cooks. And I'm going to include myself in that one.
That's very good, Marta. Well, you mentioned, Kat, the story of food and how you talk to the different makers, bakers, everyone. We all know sustainability is a big part of the food scene these days and the food story. What do you do in your day-to-day life, whether it's on the film set or at home, when it comes to sustainability?
Sustainability is, I think, a very general, overarching term that folks don't really understand. I think the people are coming to understand it more. Sustainability means that you can continue in a process without like reaching a critical point where you have to change whatever that system is. And so we have to get to a point of sustainability. And part of what I think is really important in terms of the type of storytelling that I do and other roles that the media and especially food media can play is teaching people about how to make sustainable choices. So things like shopping at your local farmer's market. That is kind of very, very easy. But, unless you live in Florida or Southern California or places where farmers markets are truly thriving, it's very difficult to eat local throughout every season.
Sure.
If you're living in a place like Missouri, which is where I am, and we're having an ice storm today. So anyway, let me kind of back up. Sustainability is something that people can apply to their everyday lives. Number one, shopping local is one. And number two, I would suggest, and this is something that I do, composting at home is something that very easily can take food waste out of the waste stream. A lot of folks don't realize that the majority of the food that's grown in the United States ends up in a landfill. We have a tremendous issue with food waste. And all of that food, if it's not properly composted, it's releasing methane into the environment. So it's contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions, global warming, which a lot of folks don't realize that when they throw the banana peel into the trash, they're like, oh, it's going to break down. It's a natural product. But when it's all put into a landfill, it is something that is really having a negative effect on the environment. So I would say shopping local, composting, eating less meat, I think is also a very important decision to make. I personally am a meat eater, but I choose to consume meat that is humanely raised, and it's one of the things that when I'm choosing people to cover for tastemakers, I'm looking for people who are doing things in the right way, and by that, the right way means that the animals are cared for, the land is cared for, sustainability is top of mind. And you talk to some regenerative farmers and, some people even who are raising cattle, and the fact that they're using intense rotational grazing to sequester carbon. There are a lot of things that are going on in food production where a lot of farmers are extremely intentional in the way that they are applying sustainable practices into how they're growing their food. So it can be tough to find time to seek out those particular producers in your area, but if you can, then I would highly recommend supporting them.
That's a great point, Kat. And you would know this better than us, but don't you have, I believe, the oldest farmers market, Soulard Market, right on the banks of the Mississippi? Isn't that one of the oldest farmers markets in the U.S.?
It is one of the oldest, and actually, it's within walking distance of my house.
Oh,
I
that's
live in
convenient.
one of the, yeah, I live in one of the older neighborhoods in St. Louis, and so Soulard Market, which was founded in the 18th century, is just like a mile or so down the way. So I walk over there, and it's kind of in a way an open air market. It has these two really long aisles, and it's just packed full of people who are there with their families. And it's not your typical farmers market because it is so large. It's very diverse in terms of what it offers. There are some like food stalls and all that kind of stuff. So yes, Soulard, right here in St. Louis. It's exciting to see how something like that was able to kind of survive the industrialization of food and the rise of grocery stores, which ended up usurping kind of your local butcher shops and your local bread bakeries and your truck farmers markets, which is what people used to do. Is that farmers would just come up to a central spot, open up their trucks, and then people would just kind of like barter and
Yep.
trade for food. And so anyway, yes, thank you for knowing that Soulard is right here in St. Louis.
That's great trivia. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. I love to learn about things like that because I always say to everybody that then you can throw these little trivia things in a cocktail party and you'll get everybody's attention, right? So, isn't it true though? So, you mentioned about Feast TV, and you also had a magazine, right, called Feast, and also another. You also co-created a sauce, right? That I am so intrigued about because I believe in sauces and condiments like nobody's business. I actually think that the test of a good cook, besides cooking eggs, like they always say, is how to make a good sauce, particularly when you have to emulsify it. Now I'm gonna get like technical with like chemistry words. So, like all along this journey, what do you think that made you so successful? Have such a loyalty base of listeners? I mean, we can call them consumers in a way because you have a service, right? You're providing a service. So, what do you attribute to your success? And here, that's actually an ulterior motive question for me because I am now starting that journey. So,
To me, especially when you're building an audience, when you're a media entity, it really is understanding the needs of your reader and giving them useful information that is actionable, that it's entertaining. And I would say that a lot of the success of the work that I've done is that I am a stickler for fact checking. I mean, which is very dry, but it's like I always want to do work that matters, work that has an impact. So, we don't just go out and tell surface stories about, oh, this new, cheese place just opened up. It's diving a little bit deeper, giving people, more interesting information about their neighbors and about their community. And, that truly is what is at the heart of the craft food and beverage movement is people. I mean, yes, you end up with products that are high quality and that they taste great, and that's wonderful. But the really true compelling reason that the people have been drawn to this is that connection to their community, and especially now, I think we're really yearning for a reconnection with our neighbors and our friends. And food can really be a conduit to that, a bridge to that. So I think that kind of now more than ever, that focus on connecting through food, through your local community, connecting, like going to your local craft brewery to raise a glass together, or meeting up at the farmer's market and going shopping together, having friends over for dinner parties, those types of things, I think are what build ties within community. So I don't want to make it sound, too dramatic, but really I do think that one of the things that has led to the success of the work that I've done is that it comes back to the people,
Yep.
because that's really, I think, what resonates in terms of storytelling.
Yeah, and like you said, right? We're now living in times where there is that movement to get back to the roots of how we started, right? Let me tell you what. I came to the U.S. to live in the U.S. 20 years ago, and I never saw such beautiful products that tasted like nothing, right? It was
Yeah.
so sad that you see like this gorgeous tomato. I'm obsessed with tomatoes, and it's just water, right? It's sad. It's sad. So I'm so glad that more and more people are uh, shopping and eating local, like you said, overly used, but on the other hand, not used enough, right?
Well, and what you're really referring to is that industrialization of food. It's the homogenization of food. So that big, round, bright red tomato that travels well, that can go from Southern California to Missouri without, looking too damaged. It doesn't have a lot of flavor, but it looks really good
Looks
on the
good.
shelf. Yeah. And so what we're really seeing now is a return to more heritage varieties that are more delicate. They aren't as shelf stable, but they have a ton more flavor. And, that's really kind of the balance that a lot of farmers and retailers and chefs are working to find right now is how do we inject more flavor, sustainability, diversity into the food system in a way that makes economic sense. And so I think that's kind of one of the challenges, for lack of a better term, but opportunities more so, that we're looking at now. Because like back in the 70s, 80s, it was like iceberg lettuce, those big red tomatoes, the same varieties of whatever. And now you walk into a grocery store and it's just like this rainbow of things that you can choose from. But you'll find even more diversity at the farmer's market, because that's where it's that one-to-one connection. So if a piece of produce is slightly imperfect, you can actually talk to the farmer about it. Like, oh, well, these apples don't look perfect because they're organic, and so they aren't that perfectly green, shiny, whatever. So a lot of that kind of comes back to consumer education, in terms of understanding what the heritage varieties look like, and also understanding that slightly bruised, whatever, that might just be part of, you know, supporting a local farmer as opposed to more the industrial food system.
Hmm. And it's okay to wait for the season. That's another
Yeah.
thing, right?
We're
That
very impatient, Marta. No.
I remember like how exciting it was for strawberry season, which is,
Yes.
like I remember we had them, and they were not sprouting until like late, like spring, right? And then cherries that have such a short season, and that's part of the excitement of it, right? It's okay to wait, people. You don't have to eat the strawberries all year long.
I would agree with you. And it's so funny because I'll know, like, I'll be talking to someone who's cooking something way, way out of season, and they'll be like, July, and they'll be like, this orange doesn't taste very good. I'm like, yeah, this orange is during season in the winter. Or, oh, this strawberry is really terrible, like in fall. I'm like, exactly, because this is not the season. So no, I completely agree with you that if we start eating more seasonally, almost by default, you start eating more sustainably, because you're going to be eating foods that are meant to be consumed in whatever season that you're experiencing. And so that mileage from the field to your plate is going to be a lot less.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not natural to eat fruit that comes from Chile. It's delicious in
Well,
season,
unless you
but
live there.
exactly, unless you're
Right.
right there.
Right. Kat, I know you know that Sistana's recycled fiber is added to all kinds of sustainable packaging, from paper cups to carry-out containers to sandwich wraps and even microwavable sleeves. And I just was curious. I know you've been talking about the farmers that you've worked with and some of the emerging brands, not only in the Midwest, but nationally. But do you see any type of a consensus, or I should say growing consensus, for using sustainable packaging, especially if they're in the organic space, to promote their sustainable platforms and connect better with more educated consumers?
Absolutely. People care. If you're going to seek out a craft, local, organic, whatever term, product, the packaging is part of it. I mean, we're looking for things that can be recycled. We both know that plastic, almost all of it, doesn't end up being recycled.
Correct.
Yeah, I know. And, again, it's that consumer education piece. And what I have found, and I'm really heartened to see, in just the past few years, there is a real intense focus on seeking out things that have less packaging and sustainable packaging and truly recyclable packaging, because people are starting to really understand the environmental impact of their choices, and especially younger folks. I think that it's kind of like part and parcel with their worldview is that they want they're rejecting fast fashion. They are looking at electric vehicles. They're looking at the impact that they're making on the environment because they see what the impact has been, like of the 20th century was on where we are at this moment. And those choices deeply matter. So absolutely, when makers are choosing packaging for their products, being able to not only from an ethical standpoint choose sustainable and recyclable packaging, but also from a brand story standpoint that they can say this product is packaged within something that is sustainable and recyclable, like the work that you guys are doing. That I think just adds to their brand story and adds to their appeal to consumers who are seeking something like that out.
That's great to hear your perspective on that, because Kelly and I, my colleague Kelly Kubasiak and I were recently at a sustainability conference, and we did talk to a lot of fellow suppliers about this. But it's great to hear from you on the consumer level that you really see that when you're producing your show, that people are really gravitating more and more towards sustainable packaging. So that's fantastic.
And it's not even just in the way that I'm producing my show. Jump on Instagram and You'll see that people, I mean, it is something that is becoming just more and more prevalent, that people are questioning the way that things get to them as consumers, and they're doing their best to make these sustainable choices that aren't going to have a negative impact on the planet.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm actually, one of those, I don't want to bring the mood down a little bit here, but it's really hard from like a material, expert's point of view, not to criticize, and sometimes not even constructively, because there's so many make believe out there and greenwashing and things like that. And yes, there is definitely a movement towards that, but there is also so much that needs to be straightened out, so many myths that need to be debunked. But this is the subject for another podcast. I know.
One of the things that I am anxious to see happen is that it's not always just a bottom line consideration, because I think that a lot of folks are still resorting, especially like in the restaurant space, like with takeout containers, they're still resorting to styrofoam and things like that, which is deeply unsustainable. It's not recyclable in any way. And, so I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in convincing the people who are making those purchasing choices that it's worth a little bit more to not choose the lowest common denominator styrofoam packaging, because the impact of that choice far outweighs the monetary savings. But that's a really tough conversation to have, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to do a little build up on that. The problem that I have is not so much with phasing out those very well known to be very, environmentally impactful in a negative way, but also what are the choices? What is the impact of the choices, which is sometimes not as lessened as those who promote them claim that they are. That is, that to me is where the problem resides. If you're going to solve a problem, I don't want to have a bigger problem, right? So, anyway, going back to your maker movement. So, I actually believe strongly that you and, hosts like yourselves of food shows, cooking shows, food shows, and those that follow the food, right? And there's actually a show that I love called Follow the Food. Um, are responsible for us to all of a sudden become almost like I wouldn't say experts, but certainly we're much more seasoned connoisseurs of what the right thing is to do when it comes up to locality, right? So tell us what your take on why that is happening so much now is.
So what I would say is that that's the role that the media plays. Is the media tells stories and they reflect back onto the audience what is happening in their community, whether it's local, regional, national. And so I think it's the responsibility of people in the media to tell stories beyond just this tastes good. It's like you have to go deeper. And so when you're talking about the fact that you're learning a lot by watching these cooking shows, I mean, that's what makes a show meaningful. Even if it's fun, it can still be something where you have a takeaway. It's not just mindless. So I mean, I think I'm kind of like getting to what you're saying, right? I mean, that's it. I mean, when you look even at the beginning of cooking shows, Julia Child, she was teaching people how to cook. And so it wasn't just this passive, like consumerism of like eye candy. It really is the person watching it can take away how to make beef bourguignon or whatever it might be. And I also think it's important that that each host has their own real perspective and voice, and that they allow that to bring out the voices of the people who they are interviewing, the people who they're covering. Or if they do have a cooking show, then obviously it's very much about their own perspective on like the flavor that they're creating in the kitchen, and whether it's something that is impacted by a cultural background or a certain type of diet or cooking style, whatever that might be. That's really the diversity of voices in food media has never been more broad at this time, and I think that ultimately that is a fantastic thing for people who enjoy watching, reading, and hearing about food, because there are tons of people who are in that space.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got, I wouldn't say lucky, but certainly you got so much more. We needed you a lot more during the pandemic, right? When we had those times when it's like, well, I can't go outside and eat at a restaurant, so might as well like make the most of it at home and follow what you are communicating. I honestly think that it was a job greatly done, because yes, TV media has, in for a very good portion of TV media, it's being so scrutinized because it doesn't do good, right, for us. But I think that in this case is one of those stories with TV media has done great for society. So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh,
Truly.
welcome. I mean, I would agree with you. I think that the word media is kind of fraught at this moment, but that's what it is. I mean, it's people who are funneling stories to an audience, and there's a great deal of responsibility to, in my opinion, to tell stories that matter. And so I'm glad that you enjoy the show. Thank you.
Very much so. And I always get tips of where to go when I am on location. You will never find me in a chain restaurant, by the way.
Good.
I wouldn't think so, Marta.
Yeah.
Kat, I know when you were growing up, you lived around the world and you had the chance to experience a lot of exotic cuisines, and then you ended up in St. Louis, which has its own one of a kind types of specialty dishes like toasted ravioli and that delicious gooey butter cake. We've seen other cities have other unique specialty offerings, whether it's Chicago's deep dish pizza or Baltimore's crab cakes or even Quebec's poutine. Do you see some of these types of specialty offerings expanding to supermarkets more regionally or even nationally as people watch tastemakers, your show, and other cooking and food shows?
Oh, sure. I mean, poutine, as you just mentioned, that is something that has become very trendy. And actually, I recently saw that people have what they're calling fried ravioli that they're making at home, like from the grocery store or whatever. And of course, everybody on St. Louis from St. Louis is like hashtag St. Louis, like that's actually St. Louis. And so part of the one of the good things about kind of the internet, social media, things like that, is that these kind of like regional gems really can be given a broader audience. And so I absolutely think that, as people are, introduced to these kind of like wacky regional favorites like gooey butter cake, you absolutely are then able to find more and more, a boxed gooey butter cake mix in grocery stores outside of the St. Louis area. And that's what, again, I mean, food to me is something that is so reflective of culture in a lot of different ways. And, so if you're able to get a taste of, Maryland crab cakes and you're living in Ohio, I mean, that's a way that you can kind of like just in your own home or at a restaurant or something like that, kind of like go on a little trip without ever having to leave home base. So yeah, for sure.
Besides the TV work and Feast and Sauce and Tastemakers, so we know that you're also the VP of Communications for the city of St. Louis, right? Of Explore St. Louis, which is the city's Convention and Visitors Bureau. Congratulations on that. That sounds like a very exciting job. And we hear that you have John Goodman, which I actually personally love as an actor. By the way, is he from St. Louis?
Yes, he's from St.
All
Louis.
right, all right. Now I see the connection. So tell us how you're planning on leveraging this role to continue on this fabulous journey of like convince the consumer that eating local and consuming local is the way to go. And I think that, and I'm pretty sure, and you have historical facts to back
Yeah.
you up on that.
Well, here's the thing. Travel and tourism, one of the anchors of travel to any new city is where are we going to eat? Where are we going to drink? And so I see the message of, eating local, drinking craft, all of that is absolutely tied up with the travel and tourism industry. In the same way that finding a boutique hotel and going to a local ball game or a local museum. I mean, you travel in order to immerse yourself in the experience of that new place, whether it's a city or if it's a rural experience, whatever it is. You're not there to eat in a chain restaurant and shop at Walmart or something like that. I mean, you're not there
You
to go
shouldn't.
through your everyday routine. You're there to experience something that's unique. And so to me, my focus on really promoting and helping to put a spotlight on people who are doing things independently and sustainably, that's a natural fit with the work that I'll be doing with Explore St. Louis in positioning St. Louis as a travel and tourism destination. Because where else are you going to get the toasted raviolis?
Of course. And it's part of, like you said, it's part of a trip, right? Like what is the first thing that you normally hear from a person that gives you feedback of the last place that they've traveled to? Oh, the food was excellent,
Exactly.
right? Or right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And so yeah, to me, I've spent the majority of my career really kind of promoting and spotlighting, people who make this a unique place to visit or to call home. And so being able to join Explore St. Louis it was such a natural fit because it's something that I've been doing my entire career. So I'm really excited to be joining that team.
I need to go to St. Louis.
Yeah, you
I've
should,
been
Marta. Should
I've
do a
been
road
through St.
trip.
Louis. Yeah, I can. I can. I'll reach out.
Please do. I would love that.
Well, it's a great town. I can tell you. I used to live there for a couple years back in the late 80s. Got my first job out of college there, and that's where I got exposed to gooey butter cake, and I'm still addicted to it. If you guys haven't had it, it is fantastic.
I have not. I've had the fried ravioli though, and the baked ravioli. That yes, because that is something that has made it out of St. Louis a lot more. The butter cake, I hadn't even heard of it. So
well, and Cat, from a history standpoint, even I know in the World's Fair in 1904. Wasn't I think the ice cream cone attributed to St. Louis and being invented there during the 1904 World's Fair?
Yes. So the story goes that an enterprising ice cream salesman was looking for a way to make the ice cream portable, and so made a waffle and just kind of like wrapped it and put the ice cream inside, and so it was the waffle cone. And I believe that also the hot dog bun was introduced for exactly the same reason, that people want to be able to walk around because they're at the World's Fair. And so how do you make a sausage portable? You put it in a bun. So
oh my gosh.
That is so fun. Let me tell you like a little piece of information here too. I lived in Singapore for a few years, like around 8 years ago or something like that. And the ice cream sandwich in Singapore is an actual piece of white bread slice. It's a white bread slice, and they slap some ice cream on it. That's your ice cream sandwich.
It's very literal. It's a literal interpretation.
Yeah, and why a piece of bread like that? Because in a tropical weather, like regular bread or waffles or like the waffle cone type of thing, you can't have that. It doesn't get crunchy because it's so humid, right? Mm-hmm. So might as well just have the soggy piece of bread if it's gonna get soggy anyway.
Yes. Well, now I have a reason to go to Singapore. As if I need a reason to go to Singapore.
Yeah. Let me know. I'll give you some tips. I know Singapore very well.
Well, Cat, we could continue talking about food until dinner time. It's this is so fascinating.
I'm getting hungry.
We're all getting hungry. But as we conclude our conversation with you today, I just wanted to ask you one final question. From your experience working with so many successful food and beverage businesses, is there anything you could share with our audience tuning in today? Any emerging entrepreneurs, any advice you could give them on starting a new business, especially in the sustainable space?
Yes, absolutely. What I would say is there are so many aspects to success in product development. Branding, obviously, is something that is critical. But understanding your brand message. So being able to effectively communicate the way that your product is made, what makes it unique, why it stands out. So say you mentioned Green Dirt Farm. So if you're there in a sea of other sheep's milk cheeses, why choose Green Dirt Farms? I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are great at creating products, but they aren't necessarily great at telling their own stories. And so what I would suggest is, focus on perfecting whatever it is that you're making, but think really about that brand positioning. Your packaging is absolutely critical to kind of like catching somebody's eye, either on the shelf of a grocery store or at the farmer's market, and then really get comfortable with saying why your product is unique and that people should buy it, because that is what is going to lead to your success.
Well, that's fantastic advice.
I'm taking all the notes about that. So thank you for that.
And thank you for all your marvelous stories and for joining us today on Pulp Nonfiction. It's been a blast. Thanks so much.
This has been seriously such a great time. I am so delighted, and thank you. I'll make sure now. I gotta plan a trip to St. Louis. That's the only thing that I can think of
Road
right
trip.
now.
Well, you know how to get in touch with me. Greg, Marta, thank you for having me on the Pulp Nonfiction, which I love the name, podcast. It's been a really enjoyable experience, and what I mainly want to say thank you to say what I mainly want to thank you for is allowing the conversation to go beyond the surface of food and really talk about things that matter. And so, thank you very much. It's really been it's been a great afternoon.
Thanks, Kat.